Let me get my package out here. This is a workshop, and which I know you know if you've read the agendas and gone online and so forth. So I have item number 2, public comment on items on the agenda. I have one person signed up, Jeanette. Hello, Jeanette. Good to see you again.
Right. Actually, I just wanted to put a bug in your ear. I don't usually come to work sessions, and I noticed that you're going to be discussing and giving direction to the city about the budget and all. So I would like to propose as a priority, for the sake of the people, obviously, is that um, that you direct the city to work mindfully and sensitively on a fiscally conservative budget, one that's not burdening the people that pay for the budget, which are people like me that own homes. The past number of years, we know that our taxes have been going way up. You know, appraisals have been going way up. Everybody's freaking out because of the appraisals now. But ultimately, it comes down to the tax rate that is set by the city, which you have the authority and power to set that wherever. So as taxes go up, that should come down. As appraisals go up, the tax rate should come down. And so it starts with the budget, obviously, because you have to set the tax rate to fund the budget. So I just ask that you consider really working hard at not only not going any more than last year, but actually find a way to cut some, because as you know, you have 2.8 million extra money in the fund. I think there's room to do both. There's room to help the people which you represent and you serve. It has a lot to do with whether they have a quality of life or a life at all. I'm at the point where it's getting really close to where I might have to leave. And that'd be sad because I raised my kids here. They were born here. I've been a big part of the of Fredericksburg. I've helped, so, and I'm speaking for many, many, many people. And many of my neighbors have left, families and people like me, because it got too unbearable. So please keep that in mind. I think there's room to do both, definitely. And again, with inflation and gas prices and everything else, there's no more room for us to cut. And I think it would be nice if the city cuts this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. There was one written comment submitted, and my printer went on the blink before I got here. Does anybody have that can summarize it? I know it's from Ms. Hicks. Anybody have that can summarize? I know it was about essentially a comment relative to what Ms. Hormuth was talking about, is recognizing appraisal raises. And there was also a comment about the, what's it called? The money, the Fed money.
Talking about the, here it is.
Thank you, Tony.
American Rescue Act.
Okay. Should I just summarize this? Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Okay. How is it the city has $2.8 million in excess funds? And then let's create a conservative budget, lessen the tax burden on citizens. Item number 2 was a response to the American Rescue Act Fund, and making the point that this should be returned. And we have people in the community that would supplant, and a hesitancy to take money from the feds. That was Ms. Hicks' comment, so that's on the record. All right. Item number 3 is a discussion to consider, discuss, and provide direction regarding City Council priorities regarding FY 2023 budget. Shall we start with Mr. Bailey?
Yes, sir. And thank you, Mayor, City Council. You might notice that we have another room full of city staff. Staff is here to answer questions, provide input throughout the conversation that we have today. And that's what this is really intended to be, is just a real high-level conversation, setting budget priorities. Just for the council's information, the mayor and I did meet this morning and talked about community priorities. Community priorities and budget priorities can somewhat be the same. In a future meeting, probably at the end of next month, we'll talk more about community priorities, but all of what we're talking about today, a lot of projects, programs, and so forth, can be tied to that future discussion. So for the benefit of staff in the room, the public, and the council, this is part of our annual budget process. This meeting is on the approved budget calendar. This is actually the second step in the process, working with the council. A couple of weeks ago, we met with the council and presented our capital improvements plan. It's a 20-year plan of all of the projects, programs, equipment, and so forth that will be considered in the budget over the next 20 years. A lot of detail in next year's projects and over the next 5 years. Council has had the opportunity to digest that information. We're here today talking about those top priorities or anything on the list that we may have missed that you want to make a priority. We will take this information, and as we're going through the budget, add this information to the discussion to come up with a proposed budget that is submitted to council on the 15th of July, and then discussed in a public meeting on the 20th. So again, this is a very long process. This is one of the very beginning points in that conversation. So when we look at the capital improvement plan, all the projects included, there's really 3 different pots of money that we're looking at. The first is the general fund, funds like the street department, PD, fire EMS, the enterprise fund, water, wastewater, electric, stormwater vegetation management. And then we have some projects plugged in that will require debt financing. Those are the very large projects that we talked about at the very beginning of the meeting. I sent an email out to the council last week as a primer to get you thinking a little bit again about the capital improvement plan projects. Does everybody have this with them? Yes, sir. Okay. You might refer to this if you haven't in the last couple of weeks. Refer to this, looking at the projects that we might be talking a little bit more about today as the council brings these up. When we look at the projects included in the CIP, really a lot of those, as I indicated, came from master planning efforts, the majority of the public works projects, but a lot of them also came out of the path to the future process that we went through and completed in 2018. I'm going to go ahead and pass these down. And if you look at this document, the priorities that were identified really can be lumped into 2 different categories. What makes our community great and what could make it better? When you look at the different areas of concentration in the visioning document, we had the business visioning committee, the family life vision committee, the government vision committee, and the quality of life vision committee. Just to give you an idea, at the end of the executive summary of the report, if you're looking at it on page 12, there's a section called entitled Recent Accomplishments. And it states, while the focus of the visioning committee was on the creation of a long-term vision, many specific short-term recommendations were identified by the visioning committees. And those are listed below. If you take a look at this list, we've already accomplished a lot of these things. And these are more of the things that we're talking about. And you can see how some of these tie to the budget. For instance, development of plans for the adoption of, by the City Council, of new trails at Fort Martin Scott. We identified that as a need. We've constructed those trails. If you skip down to number 4, adoption and implementation of new short-term rental ordinance, that might fit into more of a community priority discussion, but that has been completed. Improved ADA compliance by construction of sidewalks, establishment of new city communications program. A lot of these items have either been completed or are underway. So again, a very good document to reference, a lot of community input, about 1,000 hours of work on this report. So a lot of the things that you see here are the priorities that were identified by the community, and a lot of those projects are reflected in the capital improvements plan. Just also from a very high level, wanted to touch on just a couple of things, and then I'll open up the discussion to the council. When we were going through the capital improvement plan presentation, again, the large items that might be considered for debt financing are a new city hall, a new police station, municipal court building, new fire station, and we had a number of street extension projects, very large projects. The lowest cost would probably be the fire station, 10, 12 million, up to, if you include all of the street projects together, probably 50 million. Other projects that we talked about during the presentation were broadband. I know that the council has gone through an education process over the last couple of weeks, visiting with IT on our proposed broadband improvements. A lot of activity there. We talked also about our comprehensive planning effort coming up. We're doing interviews this week, selecting a firm. As part of that, the council may consider including a parks master plan. I know one of the items that Emily indicated in her email was interest in improving parks. We do have tennis courts and pickleball courts plugged in. I have a very good plan in place for those. As you heard, pickleball is a growing sport, so those are currently projects that are plugged into the CIP and will be proposed during the budget process. We talked a little bit about the landfill. Does it make sense to expand the footprint of that landfill, or maybe consider a transfer station, as other communities our size are doing, to again limit that future risk? City Hall security. This is one that I don't want to forget about. You see the first step we're taking in security as you walk through the door. It's very important that we protect our employees and visitors and keep everyone in City Hall and other city facilities safe. And then finally, future water supply. As we're looking at these projects, as we're talking about improvements to the system, just a reminder to the council, we are set up to begin looking at future water supply options, the development of an additional well field a little bit further out of town, potentially adding some items to flow test wells that we might have access to, and so forth. So these are just some of the items that might prime your thinking as we go through the process today. The way I would like to do this, again, just open this up for discussion, and Mayor, I don't know what your preference would be to go around, but I would like to get 1 to 3 different ideas and or priorities from the council that we can put up on the wall here as we're discussing these, put them up there for everyone to see again and again, to just continue that discussion. With that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can open up for discussion.
Let's start with this. Let's start with this, council. If you have come today with some strong recommendations for priorities, I would like you to speak up first. Or if you have strong recommendations for a concept in terms of how we're budgeting this year, I know that there is a lot of concern about the overall economy, how it's impacted people here, and how it will probably continue to. So that always has to be an underlay of our discussion. But just so everybody knows, this is the first meeting, right? This is the first budget meeting discussion that we've had in open session, right? I mean,
It'll be the second that we've had, starting with the capital improvement plan. Right.
Yeah. I mean, various council members I know have visited with department heads and so forth, but this is the first scheduled workshop for, the second scheduled workshop for this. So we're starting from scratch, sort of, kind of, and taking the advice and recommendations of the citizens here. So I'll just open the floor, please, to the council who wants to speak up about general feelings about the budget and priorities as we begin the process. Anyone?
I'll be happy to.
Go, Bobby.
Um, One of the things I think we really need to concentrate on this year is the Parks Department. The parks have been, for various reasons, in my feeling, they've been neglected for years, and we've fallen behind in what our community deserves and what they expect. And I'd like us to see us really concentrate on the parks budget. I'm excited about a parks master plan, and I think we should do that. I've had several calls about the Oak Crest scoreboards, and I think we should move that, and LBJ scoreboards, and I think we should move that forward into this year's budget. Tennis and especially pickleball are a big deal now. Pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the United States, and I think we should take a hard look at that. As far as other items, I think the broadband is important from a communication standpoint. A lot of people are working from home now, and it's important that they have good communication. And I believe that's, I think we're on the beginning of that. I think more and more people will work from home. I think that's going to be a big deal. It is a big deal, but a bigger deal. I think we need to take a serious look at a transfer station at the dump instead of increasing the facility that we have. I have some concerns. We don't have a problem now, but I have some concerns that if we ever do have leakage, that's going straight into our aquifer, and that will be a big issue. I'm not sure we can recover. And there are ways to dispose of our trash other than digging a hole and put it in there. So I think we need to take a hard look at that. And I've noticed almost every department has some form of software listed. And I think we need to take a look at that because we're a growing city and we need to be efficient. And if we can be efficient through software and computer improvements, as opposed to buying, hiring more employees, which are very difficult to find, I think we're better off that way. So, other than the usual fire, police, infrastructure items, I think those are some of the big things that I'm looking at. Thank you.
I'll jump in. I'm kind of, I think one of our big priorities, and I know it's got to work with the county, but we really need to work on the communication system for law enforcement, for EMS. Seems to be a critical matter that needs to be taken care of, and I realize we can't do it by ourselves, but that's a high priority, and which we see more and more now, security. I'm not so sure that I keep hearing things about Main Street problems on weekends, and I'm not so sure that we have, or maybe we should look into doing additional patrols on foot on the weekends and the evenings, maybe up to a certain time. I'm not sure that, but that would, in a sense, I'm looking to increase our security, our law enforcement. I think that's a high priority with the traffic issues we have. And so I That's kind of my pet peeve right now. Of course, all of that includes the additional people that are in the community for the weekends. I think we need to concentrate on that.
Ms. Joseph, Ms. Kirchner?
Okay. I think one of the big things we need to look into is making sure the people who serve our city are well compensated, taken care of, that the salaries are competitive. And I noticed there's a lot of overtime charges. A lot of people are working over, whether it's because of staffing levels or, just the work needs to be divided up between more than one person. Looking into that more. Public safety, I'm very concerned about City Hall and around town, security there. Infrastructure, I'm very interested in talking more about the arteries that are being proposed. I think that will help residents not deal with so much Main Street traffic. And lastly, parks, I agree. We need to beef up some deferred maintenance on parks.
I agree with everything y'all said. I think our highest priority needs to be police and fire, our safety. Broadband's important, and I agree with Tony about a meeting between the city and the county. I'm glad to see there's one on the schedule because we need to move ahead with that. So I think the new arteries that are planned are a really good idea. So I'd like to see us go ahead with those street projects.
I suppose well, I don't suppose. The first priority for me is also law enforcement. It is conversations with the PD and finding out what is going to be needed over the next year, what are the stresses and the strains. Um, Along the same lines that Tony talked about, I hear the same things, and I don't know what the solutions are, but I know it is law enforcement. Also had a long conversation with the enforcement today regarding STRs and the ones that are creating issues in our neighborhoods and how we can better address that. So that's going to probably require a little bit more of a law enforcement presence or law enforcement application. And then I don't know with regard to I agree with Ms. Kirchner about our good employees. I wonder if, and this is something I've not actually talked with department heads about, but I wonder about adding someone to deal with the STR issues that has created a fairly different set of administrative tasks with regard to permitting, with regard to re-permitting, with regard to compliance, with regard to complaints, all of that sort of thing. This is something that we inherited, and it's a reality. And we're looking for ways to cooperate with the owners and the reservation services and so forth, but to mitigate these factors on our neighborhoods. And I don't know if that would require an additional staff member or if it would require reallocating of resources in another way or job descriptions and so forth, but I'd like to consider that.
Just for my understanding, doesn't that fall under code enforcement? Am I correct?
What I understand, Sharon, is there is a very large administrative task going on with over, what is it, 1,200, I think, on the books now, something like that. 1,200
It's closer to 1,300.
Closer to 1,300 SDR properties in the city. And we're shifting over to this new software program you heard about. But any software requires obviously training and management, and because we have so many, it becomes a day-to-day task that is very new in the last 3 years. That's what I'm understanding.
So you're suggesting that we have a new department, or I'm asking, does
No.
it fall under the code enforcement?
Oh, it'd be in code enforcement, yes.
Okay.
Be either an additional employee or an allocation
Okay.
of job description. I'm not sure what the answer is. But I just wanted to broach the subject of the possibility that that might be an additional outlay.
Thank
And
you.
I'm not convinced it is. I just wanted to throw it out there to say we ought to look at it. Because this is a new reality for us. Okay.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Clinton, do we have money in the budget already for the comp plan?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we do go through with that. I think that's
Right.
very important.
We are proposing a slight increase in that budget for next year. We probably execute the contract, spend some of the dollars in the current budget in that effort. But we're looking at making an adjustment to the budget for next year to cover all of those costs. In addition to that, if we add that Parks Master Plan, that will be an increased cost there.
Where do we go from here? Now that we've got all of the council's priorities, do we need further explanation?
Well, at this point, we have everyone in the room regarding the items that you did mention. Do you want a little bit more information on, for instance, the street extension projects? I know the council has had the opportunity to look at a few of those. We basically have 2 on the north and 2 on the south. Garrett, are you prepared to talk about that at a very high level? Dollars and benefit.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I did want to update you. Chris and I went and met with TxDOT representatives in Burnett last week, and we talked about the short-term projects. Those are the safety and operational improvement projects, kind of the low-hanging fruit items. TxDOT did confirm that they don't require any additional funding by the city. So at this point, we're trying to get a definitive answer on timeline for completion of those projects. But again, the hope would be within 2 years, those will be completed. So as I hear more, I'll keep you updated. And then again, getting to the arteries or roadway extension projects that were discussed, there's 2 in the northeast part of town, Mulberry Road and Mulberry Street and Frederick Road. So Mulberry being the kind of closer in option, Frederick Road being a little further out. And then on the southwest side of town, you've got the Post Oak Road Extension and the Interloop project, also called Friendship Lane Extension. As far as cost for those projects, Post Oak is around, I think, 7.2 million. Correct me if I'm wrong. Interloop is around 25 million. I think 25.3 million is the exact number. And then on the north side of town, again, Mulberry is around, I believe, 9 million. There's a couple bridges that would be required that increase the cost of that. And then Frederick is around 21 or 22 million. So I think it is important to talk to the county regarding both those projects. We did bring them up to TxDOT. We've provided them with a funding memo. So TxDOT has different buckets of funding that they can pull from. And so our traffic consultant did identify which buckets could fund the different projects. There's off-system bridge improvements that TxDOT funds, different things like that. So I think there's still an opportunity for TxDOT to participate, but we would need to know the priority projects to approach them and kind of have a plan on the city side. Same goes for the county discussion as well.
Garrett, does the city have any preference? What goes first?
So in the traffic impact study that was completed, the closer in projects had a little more immediate benefit. There's a benefit cost ratio that's included in that study, and those closer in projects were substantially higher and provided more of a local benefit. But again, if we have regional participation, if the county's interested or TxDOT, they may support the outer projects a little more. So I think that's part of that ongoing discussion.
When you say the closer in projects, are they all inside the city limits? So would the county be willing to participate? I know you don't know the answer to that, but
So they're right there on the edge for the most part. The city has recently annexed some areas along Post Oak Road, so those corridors are planned to be in the city limits. I don't know if that would impact the county's participation or not.
thank you.
Can I add a little bit of information on a couple of other items? I might call in a few more people. I forgot to mention up front that when you look at the proposals that we're making, you go through the entire project list, you'll notice that we don't have any just major catastrophes going on infrastructure wise right now. We don't have major water lines that need to be replaced that are breaking all the time. Massive sewer problems, street issues. We don't have any potholes, or very, very few, for instance. Those are typically the issues that cities are talking about when they're talking about delving up the funding. So I'm happy to say that we've addressed a lot of those issues. When it comes to the transfer station at the landfill, as we have discussed in the past and we'll discuss a lot more in the future, if it's the council's preference, we have a limited life left of the existing footprint of the landfill. We can stretch that out, but the planning process to expand that, purchase land and expand that is pretty significant time-wise. The idea would be to construct an additional cell, construct a transfer station, collect that material within the city at the landfill, and then ship that out. We would also have, and this was one of Emily's questions, probably relocate the recycling center to that location and expand the capabilities of that recycling center, as that made sense to do that. Regarding software efficiencies, there were a number of software improvements packages that were included in the mid-year budget. We felt that those warranted a little bit more discussion with the council, so we've moved those to the regular budget process. But one of those that we feel will be very beneficial is the payroll software. That'll impact every department, create efficiencies, not only for our HR director, who spends roughly 50% of her time processing payroll, but there's a lot of time spent by each department, even at the superintendent level. So when we talk about these software packages, we want to provide you with a picture of how that's creating efficiencies. As Bobby mentioned, instead of continuing to hire people to shuffle paper and do things in an inefficient way, if we could purchase software to address that issue and create an efficiency, we're looking for opportunities to do that. I'll give Eric Whiting credit for the majority of the recommendations that are being made, especially in finance. He's taken that project on and identified a number of different efficiencies there. Security at City Hall was mentioned. That's something that, again, we'll discuss quite a bit more during the regular budget process. If it's a priority of the council, we've already started the process of evaluating City Hall. Chief Borauer was in City Hall last week with a consultant, going through the entire building, identifying the areas that needed to be addressed. So we'll come back with a lot more on that. Regarding competitive salaries, the city did go through a salary survey. Tammy, was it a couple of years ago that we implemented that? When was that fully implemented?
2016.
Okay. 21. So we have recently completed a salary survey. Of course, things are changing rapidly from that point. The county's wrestling with the same thing. They're looking at adding a supplement potentially to their salary survey that was recently completed. Those are all my comments, Mayor.
Mayor Hoover, to your point on STR enforcement issues, have you thought of potentially putting code enforcement under the police department? I think it used to be like that a while back, because right now it depends on who gets the call, if it's what the repercussions are. And to kind of standardize that, it would make sense to me to have everything in one place. Because I guess now code enforcement just reports to development services, right? Is that something we would need to like reallocate funds later on if we wanted to go that way?
Are you talking about combining code enforcement into PD? Is that, I don't know, is that something that's been discussed before?
We've discussed that on and off over the years, but made sense to do that. I've recently had discussions with Chief Warhour. We haven't had any in-depth discussions regarding that. Just, again, trying to create more of an efficiency, but at the same time, not creating a disconnect that may happen if it's separated from development services. And again, I think it would be more of a timing issue when it made sense to do something like that, if it made sense. But it is something that we have talked about again over the years and very recently discussed.
Code
Yes,
enforcement's been around a long time, right?
I'm sorry?
Code enforcement.
Yes, sir.
We've always had a code enforcer, but they fell under what?
Well, right.
Development services.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And do we have Chief Warhour? Yeah,
Sure.
right here.
He's hiding.
It's hiding.
If you want
So-
the chief to weigh in on
Yeah.
what
Weigh
that
in
would
on that,
mean.
Chief?
So there's a couple different options. Code enforcement remains under development services and operates as it currently operates. And that could be its, standalone department. But we could also look at combining, putting code enforcement under the police department. And there's several benefits to that. We would look at, or my preference would be to have that code enforcement officer, a licensed police officer that would look like every other Fredericksburg Police Department officer. And when you do that, compliance seems to go a little further. And the process of following the paperwork through municipal court or through an administrative process seems to go a lot smoother and easier. Whether it's, the uniform gun badge that shows up that gains that compliance, than it is just, an individual with code enforcement shirt. So, so there's that option, or there's the other option, keeping code enforcement under development services, but then adding a licensed peace officer that just enforces code
I see.
is an option to get more of that 24-hour coverage.
You know where this has been done, where it's modeled?
I was just recently talking to a patrol captain in Vernon, and they just moved code enforcement under the police department, but left it as a non-sworn position. And I asked him, what are some of the challenges? He said, right off the bat, if there's somebody that's not compliant or disgruntled, they're now taking a uniformed licensed peace officer to go with code enforcement. So it's pulling away from his staffing. It's made the process a lot easier because it's under one department. But when it's not licensed individual, they're having to pull a licensed police officer with badge and gun to go with an individual in a tough situation.
So it would be a dedicated officer to code enforcement. That's what this officer would do in toto, or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And would this be enforcing any city code?
Yes, all
Yeah.
city.
Oh. Yeah, I think that's worth looking at.
So would there be someone from development services? I mean, because we're talking about sign ordinances and historic review ordinances, things like that.
Sure, there would have to be, something worked out. If code enforcement stayed, two officers or three, however many stayed under development services, and we put a licensed peace officer as code, there would be some stuff we would have to work out, what the licensed police officer is going to cover, what areas we want him to focus on, and his development services still going to concentrate on sign ordinances and sign size and stuff like that. There'd be some stuff to work out.
Thank
We'll look at.
Thank you. What else, council?
Can you talk about broadband?
About what?
Broadband.
We can talk about broadband.
Um, as I'm understanding it, we have funds, right, for the city to follow the city part, but we could access more funding if we have a consortium built with the county, with the hospital, with the ISD. I'm just curious, I guess, timing of that. What needs to be, what deadlines are we under for?
Eric, is there any state money or I guess LCRA funds or anything like that associated with all that?
There is additional fundings that are available. They're only available through joining in with a partnership or consortium with a private public entity. So there are some federal funding that way. There's other funding through FISD or through any independent school district to where we could access E-rate money. Now that is, there are some fine lines between that one, but the one we're really looking at doing is because we're considered a rural healthcare. If we look at moving into a direction, I've been talking to Daniel about this, we're looking at moving into a direction and kind of like the authoritative hospital board, I believe that you had been on. If we could join a consortium like that, then we could actually take this project and then we could push it through as a full project that potentially could, the Rural Healthcare Fund could fund 65% of that entire project. Now, these are avenues that we're looking at doing. Now, Emily, you had mentioned, a timeline. We are still, we thought we would be able to get this broadband project done sooner than later. But we have found out here recently that the equipment and the product that we needed, the fiber, is about 20 months out. And that's going to get worse because of all this infrastructure funding that are coming down the pipe. So we're looking at other avenues to speed that up to maybe instead of doing 20 months out, that hopefully we can do half that time in 10 months. So we do have some time. We are looking at pursuing some of these consortiums with the hospital. We've already had meetings with them. So we are working on that to hopefully see if we can get some additional funding.
That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Eric.
Just a couple of other things that came to mind. We've been talking about parking management, parking structures as part of that. And again, just bringing these up to keep them in your mind. Affordable housing is another item we've been talking about. We do have a contract, or we're part of a contract with a number of other entities. With Vince Michelle, Affordable Housing Coordinator. We'll be hearing from him here in several weeks. But the city's contribution to that effort was $25,000. That contract expires February of next year, so that's something else that the council may want to consider as we continue talking about affordable housing. We're currently underway with our staffing studies, staffing and space needs study. We mentioned that during the CIP discussion. That will be justification for either new office space or potentially new city hall. I mentioned to the mayor this morning that the initial numbers indicate that over the next 10 years, staffing levels at city hall may grow by 5% or 50%. So a lot of needs there. Again, those justifications for those additional positions will be made by this study. We hope to cut that back just a little bit by creating efficiencies, but we are growing. The population and demand for our services is growing. Finally, looking at the priorities that were set for last year, and this comes out of the visioning study as well. There was funding to maintain an attractive community appearance, and that covers a lot of funds from parks to public works. There's a lot of services that we provide in public works: leaf pickup, brush pickup. We repaint curbs, we install sidewalks. The sidewalk program is something that we've had for a number of years, typically $100,000 a year, filling in gaps where sidewalks are needed, curb ramps, addressing some of these dangerous sidewalks on Main Street and so forth. So those types of things will also be part of the discussion. If you see areas that need to be improved in our neighborhoods, those are certainly things we want to continue to talk about and add to the budget discussion.
Do we need to hear from another staff person that is here to represent anything that we've mentioned?
Let me ask if there's any staff that has anything to add. Fire EMS, Parks. We have HR here, Chris Garrett, Shelley.
I appreciate seeing you. I don't want, if you have something you're just urgent to say, Chris. Yeah. Okay. I'm understanding, I'm still catching up, obviously, on the process and methods and so forth. What you've outlined, some of what you've outlined, I'm understanding, Clinton, is that there's a great deal of projects listed that are things that we have to look at in future, but there's not a set of really urgent infrastructure needs that we have to apply at this point, as far as we know.
That's correct.
Okay. So the things that you've mentioned, of course, the affordable housing initiative with vents and some other things, I pitch those as those are ongoing budget items anyway. And my understanding of today was, as we look at possibly either expanding or enhancing a piece of the budget, what are our priorities we'd like to continue to look at? Is that everybody's understanding that there are a lot of things that are just, I don't mean just, but they're there and ongoing city work, city budget issues?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Just want to make sure I was remembering that correctly. Was that clear in that question?
I think so. And these are basically items that you want to draw a little bit more attention to that may have been included in the
Yeah.
CIP or something that takes us in a little bit different direction.
Yeah.
Again, as we're going through the budget development process, we started that process this morning. It will continue over the next couple of weeks. We will keep these things in mind when we circle back to the council and provide you with the final budget. We will provide input based on what we're hearing today and over the next couple of weeks. You know, no final decisions are being made today. These are just
Right.
ideas that help us as we're forming the budget. And certainly this isn't the end of the conversation. Our doors are always open. We want to continue this conversation throughout September and the adoption of the budget. So this is no means, just a comprehensive set of ideas. Continue to bring those to us as you have them. We'll be working on this for the next several weeks.
Any other comments? Any other comments, council? Anything else that you'd like to? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question, something I don't understand. Under capital improvements for the electric department, future substation, land purchase, $300,000. Is that set or is it going up as we speak?
Well, it's certainly going up as we speak, but Chris can speak to the need for the property and roughly where we need for that to be located in proximity to the city limits.
Yeah, certainly. So a little bit of information in regards to the substation. Currently, our Nimitz substation, which is located out 965, kind of on top of the hill, it's shared. It's the LCRA substation, but it's shared between Central Texas and the city of Fredericksburg. Because of the growth in the county, Central Texas is taking more load, and so LCRA is saying we need to shed load from that substation in the future, requiring us to look at a substation in another area. This again would be constructed by LCRA, not by the city, but it's our understanding that if the land is already purchased, they will be quicker to develop that substation than if they have to go through the procurement process. Location, the best place for this substation is west of town. Won't disclose the exact location. Maybe we can discuss that at some point in executive session, but There's an existing transmission line that LCRA owns that comes into town, and the best location would be suited over that transmission main, so they don't have to build additional line to serve the substation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I have a process question, two things. One, like this, our whole list of these capital improvement projects, will there be a time when we're going to go line by line and say, well, I don't want this in 26, I want it in 22? I mean, I know it's kind of what we did in prioritizing, but are there times we're going to needle with move that out 2 years? That's question one. And then other thing is on some of the cost share projects that we would potentially share a cost with county or with someone else. Can we like be having those conversations beyond just our one county meeting that we have in August?
Right, very good questions. And that's something that, starting with your last question, we went over the health department budget this afternoon. And once we finish that first glance at all of the shared budgets between the city and the county, our plan is to meet with the county judge prior to that meeting and have the discussion about the changes in the budget, some of the things that are being proposed ahead of the joint city-county meeting. So I'm not sure that we had done that in the past, but as soon as we wrap that up, Krista will be scheduling those meetings, and we hope to again get that feedback and help in developing that final budget from the county. Regarding the CIP projects and where they're plugged in, I think I may have forgotten one of your other questions. Those projects do move around, as I indicated. The master planning efforts do prioritize the projects. If we're talking about public works, for instance. But say you have a subdivision development that goes in on Friendship Lane. In fact, we're dealing with this issue right now. And there's a need to upgrade a water or wastewater utility to serve that project. That project would move up on the list. Or if we have unforeseen issues with a piece of infrastructure or whatever the case may be, that is a very fluid schedule for projects. And again, if you see something listed a little bit further back and you want to discuss why it's plugged in there, feel like it should move up, this is something that we go through every single year. But again, refer back to those master plans, ask Chris and Garrett the questions. They should be able to identify exactly why these projects are plugged in, where they're plugged in. This is very fluid. We'll publish the final CIP once the budget is adopted. All the projects that are included in the budget will be in the final CIP document. What was your?
That was it.
Thing? Okay.
Those two. Thank you.
Okay. So if y'all have any concerns about where a project or a piece of equipment or a program is plugged into that CIP, or you feel strongly about adding something to that, we can certainly do that.
Oh, one more question. The mid-year budget adjustments.
Right.
When is that going to happen?
So we're looking at bringing that to the council either the first or second meeting in July. Again, we've pulled a lot of that out. A lot of that will be included in the regular budget discussions that we'll be going through over the next couple of months. The HR software, a number of different software packages. We've pulled a lot of that information out.
Glenn, would you speak a moment about revenue this year and enterprise funds? I know it's June, but speaking in general terms about the revenue streams.
And I might turn to Krista if you can provide just a little bit more detail. I asked this question to Laura last week, and she said that they're working on putting together the final projections for end of year. Those will also be available typically in July, correct, Krista? Yes. But I can tell you that last year, for instance, the general fund sales tax dollars were doing very well. We were about $1 million over projected revenues. And I think we're probably on trajectory to probably meet that or exceed that again this year. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I've just, as part of our budget preparation, I've been looking at all the enterprise utilities, and all of them are either at budget or above. So there will be at least 3 to 5% in looking at future growth for next year.
Can you tell me what 3 to 5% is in dollars when we're talking about electric and water combined?
Well, with
Rough, within $500,000?
I don't have all the figures in front of me, but probably $500,000 to $1 million if you add in all the utilities together.
And we're maintaining the proscribed reserves.
Yes, sir.
Is that a 3-month?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And is there excess reserve?
No, sir, not typically. We try to keep that
Yep.
right at the reserve.
Right.
In some funds, you'll see a little bit more.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that a lot more.
Oh, am I
in
jumping
weeks.
again?
No.
Okay.
Again, we're just working on
Okay.
trying to get all this information together.
So in general, you could say that the revenue streams are in good shape.
Sir.
However, we all are concerned about what's facing us, right? I didn't hope I wasn't the only one.
Well, some of us are more concerned than others about what's facing us,
Those who work in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
about whether we're in the beginning of a recession or there's a recession coming in 2023, how long and how deep it will be. I know you don't know, but it is a concern. There is a slowdown in the economy. I mean, the Fed's trying to slow down the economy, so it's hard to fight the central bank. That's for sure one of my concerns.
Yeah, that's one of my concerns in the whole budgeting process. I see nodding heads from Mr. Banker and Mr. Retired here. You don't have to worry about it. You're right.
Oh, I still have to worry about it.
Okay.
He's worried he's on a fixed income. You know, he's retired.
You were going to say?
Right, and if I could just add one more item, as we're getting quotes for equipment, materials, bids for projects and so forth, we're seeing some pretty significant increases. In fact, I think it was Fire EMS that I was talking to. You're seeing a month after month, 15 to 20% increase. We're trying to buy vehicles that are being sold at $35,000 over sticker. If we can get the equipment, we are going to be paying dearly. So as we're taking a look at, especially our equipment needs, project needs, we are making sure that they are top priority. We don't want to pay too much. I know that there's a lot of demand. There's a shortage. GM, for instance, and Chief can speak to this a little bit more. He can't even get a quote on police cruisers. So we just had the discussion earlier today how they're really trying to stretch what they have as far as they can. So that's really the mentality that we're going to try to take, whether it's a lease vehicle or a piece of equipment. We want to make sure, and we always have, we've had a very good equipment replacement plan in place, but we want to make sure that we're being as conservative as possible, especially right now.
Considering that's not going to change for quite some time, do we need more in the maintenance area?
That's something we're also looking at, and that's another item that we talked about this morning.
Will the lease companies be flexible? Because I know we had schedule rollovers and things like that. Will they be flexible as far as the timing?
So the problem we're running into is these the lease companies are wanting to buy these low mileage vehicles back at a premium, which helps us when we're leasing new equipment, but some of that equipment is not always available. So there is flexibility on the term. The city of Fredericksburg doesn't put a large number of miles on these light vehicles that we lease. But I don't know, Chris, if you or Garrett want to speak a little bit more to that, but these are high value vehicles that the city's driving around that we've had for 3 or 4 years. So we have to balance that, but we are extending that term in some cases.
There haven't been any questions about the council board Commission's agenda management software, does that mean we're just all in consensus that we need it?
I don't know that I understood your,
Since we haven't talked about that that management software, does that mean we're all in consensus that we need it? I guess I'm asking them. You obviously think we need it or it wouldn't be on this list.
oh, okay. What list are you referring to again?
Under under the general funds, there's the council, board, and commission's agenda management software.
You want to talk a little bit about that, Shelley?
Yes, we need it.
Thank you, Shelley.
So it makes us all more productive and efficient.
It will be more productive and efficient, and cost saving on salaries for the city secretary's department, development services department, and whoever else uses it.
So this is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Would that make the whole process digital as opposed to all the packets you print and deliver and?
Reduce paper.
Yes, it can be all digital, and yes, it will reduce a lot of paper, and then Eric's going to take it from here.
Well, if I could add to this, though, this is going to be the agenda building and management software. So every agenda item will be plugged into a list, basically, and the dates for council consideration will be based on P and Z, HRB. Everything is automatically populated in terms of the agendas, future agenda items. It's all completely managed digitally. And again, this is something that, we'd like to talk to the council in a lot more detail about, but it creates a lot of efficiencies. Spreads out that agenda building process, like we've been talking about doing, instead of cramming it into a week, trying to get review and signatures and all the background. We want to take 2 or 3 weeks to do that, give council plenty of time to ask questions and before we finalize that agenda. So it is a way to manage that process. And it's very cumbersome. Currently, things fall through the cracks. This is a way to keep everything in check.
So is it possible that if we have this software and we get it implemented, that we don't need to increase city staff by 50%, as you said earlier?
Those are the types of improvements that we're talking about, making efficiencies. We're talking about creating that will allow us to do more with less, certainly.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
But you were talking about an increase over how many years?
10 years.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But to answer your question, Sharon, I didn't take it for granted that was a foregone conclusion. I don't think anybody else did. They can still progress. But I know there's people who feel strongly. And there'll be more discussion in detail about that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Lee and I visited today with another company that's going to set up a more in-depth where the 4 of us, the team, will get together again and look at it. And this new product that we looked at today also included board tracking, board applications, and helping with the codifying process. That's also very lengthy.
Yep. Well, I look forward to hearing more of the details on it.
Hey, Clinton actually did a really good job of describing that, and they did. The only thing I might add is during the process of looking at some of these companies, we have found out that we are a bit antiquated. We do have quite a bit of paperwork that are sitting in front of you guys that it takes. I mean, that's obviously a large packet that it takes a while to get put together. So we already have devices that we purchased during COVID for each of the council members. So what Clinton was describing was this process would become more digital, and all that content would be pushed to those devices to each one of the council members. So the process would change to more of a digital type, iPad.
Good.
We don't have to change the digital format in terms of the way you receive the material. And if you prefer having a paper packet, we can certainly do both. But it just helps us put that together more efficiently. Again, we like reducing the amount of paper we push out. It takes time to put all of that together. But it's something that we've always done. So as we make the transition. If we make the transition, we'll make that slowly so that everybody can follow that. Visiting with a city manager buddy of mine up in Englewood, Colorado. They use one of these packages, and he said, I don't know how much we pay for it, but it's worth every penny. And they use it very extensively, and it really helps them with the process of putting everything together and managing the schedules and all the things. So a lot more to come on that.
Anything further? Adjournment appropriate?
So move.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? No. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Clinton.